The departure hall of Muscat International Airport glowed softly. Under midnight lights, polished marble reflecting the quiet movement of travelers who carried their lives in suitcases. Among them walked a man who looked almost invisible by design. A dark jacket, simple boots, unremarkable luggage, no bodyguards, no spectacle. Yet the weight of his presence bent the air slightly around him. Keanu Reeves. He moved with the calm of someone long accustomed to being watched. Yet tonight no one noticed him. That, he thought, was the strangest part. Fame usually clung like a shadow, but here, thousands of miles from Hollywood, he was just another passenger waiting to board an Oman Airlines flight bound west. The boarding announcement echoed gently through the terminal. Keanu glanced up at the digital screen, confirming the flight number, then lowered his eyes again. He had chosen this route carefully, quiet, indirect, forgotten by paparazzi and fans alike, or so he believed. As he approached the gate, a flight attendant scanned his boarding pass. Her professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second. 2. Brief for anyone else to notice, but not for him. Keanu felt it immediately, a subtle shift, like a wrong note in an otherwise perfect melody. "Welcome aboard," she said, regaining composure. He nodded, thanked her softly, and stepped into the aircraft. Inside, the cabin hummed with low conversation and the gentle whir of conditioned air. Warm amber lights softened the rows of seats, creating an illusion of safety. Keanu stowed his bag and took his window seat, fastening his belt with practiced ease. Outside, the runway lights stretched endlessly into the dark, like a path leading nowhere. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Keanu leaned his head against the seat and closed his eyes. He told himself this was just another flight, another crossing, another moment suspended between destinations. But his instincts, honed by years of surviving loss, scrutiny, and secrets, refused to rest. Somewhere near the front of the cabin, the same air hostess paused by a service panel, pretending to adjust a latch. Her eyes flicked toward the passenger manifest displayed discreetly on her device. One name was highlighted, flagged by a system she had never seen before. Government-level encryption. Red-coded alerts. Instructions she did not fully understand. Her throat tightened. She glanced back toward the cabin, locating the man by the window. Calm, still, almost peaceful. Nothing about him suggested danger, yet the message pulsed like a warning siren beneath her fingertips. The engines roared to life. As the plane lifted into the night sky, Muscat's lights shrinking below them, Keanu opened his eyes and looked out into the darkness. The city vanished beneath the clouds, replaced by endless black and distant stars. He felt it then, a deep, unshakable certainty. This flight was not just taking him home. It was carrying him toward something irreversible. The aircraft had reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign blinking off with a soft chime that signaled permission to relax. Passengers shifted, some reaching for headphones, others drifting toward sleep. The cabin settled into its familiar rhythm. Quiet conversations, the rustle of blankets, the distant clink of service carts. But for one air hostess, calm was an illusion. Aisha stood near the forward galley, her tablet held close to her chest. She had worked international flights for nearly 8 years and had seen every type of traveler imaginable: business magnates, politicians, celebrities, fugitives traveling under false confidence. Nothing rattled her anymore. Until tonight, the alert on her screen refused to disappear. She hadn't meant to see it. While cross-checking passenger seating after takeoff, a system notification had overridden her display. No airline logo, no familiar interface. Just a stark, coded message stamped with a warning level she'd only seen during emergency simulations. Subject identified. Do not engage. Contact authorized channel immediately. Her breath caught as she scrolled once, just once, before instinct told her to stop. The name was unmistakable. Keanu Reeves. She looked up slowly, her gaze instinctively traveling down the aisle. The cabin lights reflected softly off polished armrests as her eyes found him seated by the window, head slightly turned toward the darkness outside. He looked exactly as he did in interviews, calm, introspective, almost detached from the world around him. Not dangerous, not threatening. So why did the warning feel like ice in her veins? Aisha forced herself to move. Training demanded normalcy. Panic created mistakes, and mistakes carried consequences. She began walking down the aisle, checking seat belts, offering water, smiling politely as she passed each row. Every step brought her closer to him, and with every step her heartbeat grew louder in her ears. When she reached his row, she paused. "Would you like anything to drink, sir?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm beneath it. Keanu turned toward her, his eyes kind, attentive. "Just water, please." "Thank you." The simplicity of the exchange unsettled her more than any suspicious behavior could have. As she handed him the glass, their fingers nearly touched. In that brief moment, Aisha felt a strange certainty. Whatever was unfolding, this man did not expect it, and yet somehow it was already written. She nodded and moved on, but her professional mask cracked the instant she reached the galley again. Her hands trembled as she locked the service cart and glanced back down the aisle. The alert pulsed again, more insistent this time, accompanied by a single line of text that erased any doubt. Embassy notified. Airborne protocol active. Aisha swallowed hard. This was no longer an airline matter. It was political, international, dangerous in ways she could barely comprehend. She understood now why the instructions were clear. The galley lights were dimmed to their lowest setting, casting long shadows across the narrow space where Aisha stood alone. The soft hum of the aircraft wrapped around her, a constant reminder that they were suspended between nations, beyond borders yet suddenly bound by them all. She locked the galley door. Her fingers hovered over the secure communication panel, the one rarely used and never spoken about during casual training sessions. It wasn't listed in the standard manual, only mentioned once, briefly, during a closed-door briefing years ago. In the event of a sovereign-level alert, they had said. She never imagined she would be the one standing here now. The tablet vibrated again. "Confirm visual identification. Initiate secure contact." Aisha exhaled slowly and tapped the screen. A soft tone replaced the hum of the cabin. No dialing sound. No ringing. Just silence, thick and heavy, before a voice emerged. Calm and authoritative, as if it had been waiting. "American Embassy, Muscat. State your designation." "This is Oman Airlines cabin crew," Aisha replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm reporting a red level in-flight alert." There was a pause. Not of confusion, but of calculation. "Confirm the subject." She glanced instinctively toward the closed galley door, as if the man himself could hear his name traveling across encrypted lines. "Keanu Reeves." Passenger seated mid-cabin, window side. "Identity confirmed." The line went quiet. For 3 long seconds, Aisha feared she had made a mistake. Then the voice returned, lower now, sharper. "Do not inform the subject. Do not alter standard procedures. Maintain observation only." Her grip tightened around the device. "May I ask what this is about?" "You may not," the voice replied calmly. "This matter is under active jurisdiction." A chill ran down her spine. From the cabin, Keanu stared out into the void beyond the glass. Clouds drifted like slow-moving ghosts beneath the moonlight. He felt the shift before it happened, the subtle tightening of the air, the unnatural stillness that followed the hostess's retreat. It reminded him of moments before a storm, when even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He closed his eyes. Memories surfaced uninvited, rooms without windows, conversations cut short, promises made in confidence and sealed with silence. He had always known that certain choices came with no expiration date. He just hadn't expected the bill to arrive at 35,000 feet. Back in the galley, Aisha listened as the voice on the line continued, now joined by others. Different accents, different tones, all united by urgency. "Omani authorities have been notified. The American client mission is coordinating with them." Her heart pounded. "What happens when we land?" Another pause. "This one heavier. The aircraft will be received under controlled conditions," the voice said. "The subject will be detained upon arrival." Aisha closed her eyes. Briefly detained, not questioned, not approached. The first sign that something was wrong came quietly. The seatbelt indicator chimed on without announcement. A soft electronic sound that cut through the low murmur of the cabin. A few passengers looked up, confused. The air outside the windows shifted, clouds thickening as the aircraft adjusted its course. To most, it felt like routine turbulence. To those who knew the language of skies and borders, it was a warning. In the cockpit, the captains, Expression hardened as new. Coordinates flashed onto the navigation display. The route had changed, subtly but unmistakably. This was no weather correction. This was instruction. "Confirm source," the first officer said quietly. The reply arrived through a secure channel reserved for emergencies and state-level coordination. One line only. "Maintain altitude. Prepare for controlled descent." The captain exhaled slowly. He had flown for 25 years and had received similar messages only twice before. Both times history followed. Back in the cabin, Keanu felt the shift immediately. The engines altered their rhythm, the pitch dropping into a deeper, more deliberate hum. His body recognized it before his mind could explain it. He straightened slightly in his seat, eyes scanning reflections in the window, faces, movement, tension rippling invisibly through the space. Aisha gripped the service card as the plane adjusted course. Her training told her to reassure passengers, but her instincts warned her not to say a word. The instructions from the embassy echoed in her mind. Continue as normal. Outside, the dark sky began to change. Far below, faint lights appeared, too organized to be cities, too deliberate to be chance. Radar strobes blinked in the distance like distant stars that moved with purpose. The aircraft's systems acknowledged them silently, exchanging data faster than any human conversation. The plane was no longer alone. A low announcement crackled through the speakers. The captain's voice was calm, professional, rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, for operational reasons, we'll be adjusting our flight path slightly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Operational reasons." Keanu closed his eyes briefly. He had heard that phrase before, spoken by men who never explained and never apologized. His jaw tightened, but he did not move. Panic, he knew, only fed the machine. Several rows ahead, a child asked his mother why the plane had turned. She smiled, whispered reassurance, and pulled him closer. Life continued in small, ordinary ways, even as invisible lines of authority drew tighter around them. In the cockpit, another alert appeared. This one unmistakable: Oman. Airspace control. Active escort authorized. The captain nodded once, acknowledging the message outside. The left wing shape emerged from the darkness. Sleek, fast, unmistakably military, it maintained. Distance visible only to those who knew where to look. Isha saw it through a small window near the galley and felt her breath leave her body. The moment the aircraft crossed fully into controlled Omani airspace, the rules changed. In a secure operations room miles away from the runway, screens lit up with synchronized data, flight telemetry, passenger profiles, diplomatic clearances. Flags overlapped on digital maps: Oman, United States, International Aviation Authority. At the center of it all was a single name, highlighted and sealed: Keanu Reeves. At the American Embassy in Muscat, phones rang without sound, vibrations muted by design. Officials moved with calm urgency, their faces trained into expressions that betrayed nothing. This was not chaos. It was choreography. Every step had already been rehearsed in documents few had ever read. "The aircraft is on final approach," an aide reported. "Good," said the senior envoy, adjusting his cufflinks. "Activate the client mission." Within seconds, encrypted lines opened to a joint task unit operating under diplomatic immunity. They were not soldiers and not police, not officially. They existed in the space between jurisdictions, empowered to act when borders became obstacles. On the tarmac, unmarked vehicles rolled into position, headlights off. Omani security coordinated silently, respecting sovereignty while yielding to agreements signed long before tonight. This arrest would be clean. No spectacle, no resistance, no mistakes. Back inside the aircraft, Aisha felt the change before the landing gear deployed. The cabin pressure shifted, ears popping softly, but beneath that was something else, a gravity that had nothing to do with physics. She caught the eye of another crew member who gave her a barely perceptible nod. They had been instructed as well, quietly, carefully. Keanu sat motionless as the plane descended. The lights of the runway rose to meet them, sharp and unforgiving against the dark desert. He had stopped guessing what the charge might be. Guessing implied uncertainty, and this, whatever it was, felt final. The wheels hit the runway with a solid thud. Applause rippled weakly through the cabin, a reflex more than a celebration. The aircraft slowed, turned, then continued past the terminal, past jet bridges and waiting. Gates, toward a restricted zone rarely used and never announced. Keanu noticed immediately. So that's how it is, he murmured to himself. In the cockpit, the captain received final instructions. Hold position. Engines idle. Do not open doors until cleared. Understood, he replied, though his hands tightened on the controls. Outside, the unmarked vehicles formed a perimeter. No flashing lights, no sirens, just quiet authority. Men and women stepped out dressed in neutral colors, credentials concealed beneath jackets. Among them was a representative from the American client mission. Eyes fixed on the aircraft door inside the cabin, Aisha made her way forward. Pulse racing but posture flawless. She stopped near Keanu's row, not to speak, not to look, just close enough to confirm his presence. Their eyes met briefly. The cabin clock above the aisle flickered softly as the aircraft door opened. 2:17 a.m. The sound was subtle, a hydraulic sigh followed by measured footsteps, but it carried weight. Conversation stopped. A ripple of confusion moved through the passengers as unfamiliar figures entered the plane, not in airline uniforms, not smiling, not rushed. Their presence alone announced authority. 3 officials stepped into the cabin first, followed by 2 more who remained near the door. They scanned the rows with disciplined precision, eyes trained, movements economical. No names were spoken. None were needed. Aisha stood frozen near the forward galley, her heartbeat pounding so loudly she feared it could be heard. The lead official glanced at her. She hesitated for only a second, then nodded once and lifted her hand, pointing subtly down the aisle. That single gesture sealed it. The officials moved. Their footsteps were quiet against the carpet, but every step echoed in Keanu's chest. He had already unfastened his seatbelt. He rose slowly as they approached, not out of fear, but readiness. Years of restraint taught him this moment would offer no negotiation. The lead officer stopped beside him. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," he said evenly, voice calm but absolute. "Please step into the aisle." Around them, passengers leaned forward, whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. Phones appeared, then disappeared as another official raised a hand, silent, commanding. Recording was not permitted. Keanu stepped forward. For a brief moment, the cabin lights reflected off his face, calm, composed, unmistakably human. He looked neither surprised nor angry, only tired. "On what grounds?" he asked quietly. The officer met his gaze. "You'll be informed upon arrival." That answer told him everything. Hands gently but firmly guided his wrists together. Cold metal closed with a soft click that sounded far louder than it should have. A hush fell over the cabin. Even the hum of the aircraft seemed to fade. A child gasped. Someone whispered his name in disbelief. Keanu did not resist. He did not speak again. He simply nodded once, acknowledging a process far larger than himself. As they escorted him down the aisle, faces turned away in shame, fear, confusion. Some stared openly, searching for the villain they had been told to expect. They did not find one. They found a man walking steadily, head high, dignity intact. At the aircraft door, warm desert air rushed in, carrying the scent of fuel and sand. Bright white lights flooded the entrance, momentarily blinding. Cameras were absent, but witnesses were not. Shadows shifted outside, recording every step in memory, if not on film. Keanu paused at the threshold. Aisha stood nearby, unable to meet his eyes. As he passed, he spoke softly, almost kindly. "It's not your fault." Her breath caught. Then he was gone. The door closed behind them with a final metallic thud. Inside the cabin, time seemed to restart. Passengers exhaled. Some cried. The first leak did not come from a camera. It came from a whisper, typed hastily, anonymously, and sent into the endless bloodstream of the internet. A single sentence posted on a private aviation forum, then copied, then shared again. High-profile American actor detained after Oman Airlines landing. Embassy involved. Within minutes, the silence was gone. In a secure holding area on the far side of the runway, Keanu Reeves sat alone, hands free now, but freedom no closer than before. The room was clean, windowless, and brightly lit. 2 flags hung on opposite walls, one Omani, one American, neither offering comfort. A digital clock glowed red above the door, counting seconds that seemed determined to stretch. Outside, the world was beginning to shake. Newsrooms in London, New York, Tokyo, and Los Angeles lit up as alerts triggered on journalists' screens. Editors leaned forward. Producers made calls they had promised never to make again. No one said his name out loud at first. They didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly who this was. Is it real? Can we confirm? Run it, but carefully. Social media lagged behind by only moments. A blurry photo surfaced, taken from the back of the cabin, too dark to be clear, but clear enough. A tall figure, familiar posture, surrounded by officials. The caption was cautious. The comments were not. Shock turned to disbelief. Disbelief hardened into rage, devotion, denial. This has to be fake. Not him. He wouldn't. Inside the holding room, Keanu heard none of it. His phone had been taken. The noise of the world reached him only as distant vibrations through thick walls. He focused instead on his breathing, on the small scratches on the table in front of him, on staying present. Waiting had always been his strength. An official entered briefly, placing a folder on the table without opening it. No questions were asked. No answers given. The folder remained closed, its weight symbolic, its contents decisive. Back at the airport terminal, passengers from the flight were quietly debriefed and released. They carried the story with them in fragments, half-seen images, overheard words, the memory of metal cuffs glinting under cabin lights. Every retelling added fuel. The American embassy issued a statement an hour later, carefully worded, bloodless. The United States is aware of the detention of an American citizen in coordination with Omani authorities. Due to the ongoing nature of the matter, no further comment will be provided at this time. No denial. That was enough. Markets fluttered briefly. Fan pages froze. Streaming platforms saw sudden spikes as millions sought comfort in familiar films, searching frames for answers that would not come. In the holding room, Keanu finally looked up as footsteps approached again. This time, more than one set. The door opened to reveal officials accompanied by a man in a dark suit bearing diplomatic credentials. "Mr. Reeves," the man said, his tone respectful but distant. The transfer happened without ceremony. No formal announcement. No public documents signed in view of cameras. Just a quiet exchange of authority in a restricted corridor beneath the airport, where fluorescent lights buzzed and footsteps echoed like distant thunder. This was the space where nations settled matters they preferred never to explain. Keanu Reeves was escorted through it calmly. He walked between two officials, hands unrestrained but watched closely, his footsteps measured and steady. The corridors were cold, painted in neutral colors designed to erase memory. Doors opened and closed behind him with mechanical precision, each one sealing off another version of freedom. At the end of the corridor waited a different aircraft, smaller, darker, unmarked. Its engines were already warm. An American client mission officer reviewed documents on a tablet, scanning biometric confirmations, timestamps, and legal authorizations that stretched across continents. Oman's representative stood nearby, observing, ensuring procedure was followed to the letter. This extradition was not a favor, it was an obligation, activated by agreements older than the headlines now forming above them. "Transfer approved," the officer said. Keanu stepped forward. As he climbed the narrow stairs into the aircraft, he paused briefly, looking back toward the terminal he would never enter. Somewhere beyond those walls, the original flight's passengers were reclaiming luggage, calling loved ones, trying to explain what they had witnessed. The world was already moving on. Inside, the cabin was stripped of comfort. No overhead screens, no magazines, just functional seating and muted blue lighting that cast everything in a sterile calm. Keanu was guided to a seat near the window and secured, not harshly, but deliberately. The message was clear. Cooperation had been noted, but trust was not assumed. The door closed. The engines spooled up with a low, insistent growl. As the aircraft taxied, Keanu allowed himself one long breath. He had crossed oceans countless times, always as a traveler, an observer, a guest. This time, the sky felt different. He was no longer moving by choice. He was being delivered. Somewhere above the Atlantic, as the plane leveled out and night swallowed the horizon, an official across the aisle finally spoke. "You'll be taken directly to New York upon landing. Federal custody." Keanu nodded. "And after that?" The official did not answer. Silence filled the cabin again. broken only by the steady rhythm of flight. Outside the window, stars scattered across the darkness, indifferent and unreachable. Keanu watched them, thinking of how small the world suddenly felt and how quickly it had closed in. In New York, preparations were already underway. A secure hangar had been cleared. A transport convoy scheduled. A holding facility notified. Names were typed into systems that never forgot. By the time dawn crept across the edge of the sky, the aircraft touched down at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Just before sunrise, the early morning sky painted in muted shades of gray and pale gold. Fog clung to the tarmac, softening the harsh glare of runway lights, but it could not hide the spectacle waiting in the shadows. A convoy of unmarked black SUVs waited beyond the security perimeter, engines idling silently, doors locked and ready. Federal agents, dressed in dark suits with discreet earpieces, positioned themselves with the precision of a military operation. Cameras were barred, media kept at a distance, but the moment could not be contained entirely. In a city that never sleeps, rumors traveled faster than any security line. Inside the aircraft, Keanu Reeves remained seated, calm but alert. His hands rested loosely on his lap. He had spent hours in transit, crossing oceans and jurisdictions, yet the tension never left him. He had faced countless challenges in his life. Yet this orchestration of secrecy, authority, and power was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The door opened. A hush fell over the cabin, broken only by the soft thrum of the aircraft engines. Agents entered with quiet efficiency. "Mr. Reeves," one said, voice steady but firm. "Please follow us." Keanu rose, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. He looked neither defiant nor fearful. He simply walked, flanked by the agents, every step resonating with the gravity of the situation. Passengers who had remained on board looked on with wide eyes, murmurs of disbelief escaping despite themselves. Outside, the tarmac was a tableau of controlled chaos. Fog swirled around the convoy, headlights cutting through the mist, silhouettes of armed officers blurred by the morning haze. The world beyond waited, journalists, social media users, and millions online, but no one had full clarity yet. Only fragments, rumors, and speculation. As Keanu was guided toward the waiting SUVs, a camera flashed in the distance despite all precautions. Agents reacted immediately, shielding him. But the image had already been captured. A blurred frame, enough to ignite the public imagination. Inside one of the vehicles, Keanu remained silent. He could feel the pulse of New York beneath the tires, the city alive and unaware of the careful choreography unfolding within its airport. Perimeter. He thought briefly of freedom, the kind he had always taken for granted, and realized that at this moment, it was a concept as distant as the stars he had watched mid-flight. The convoy began its slow progress toward the federal facility. Streets cleared by cooperating authorities. Reporters began streaming live updates, headlines forming even before. The agents and diplomats arrived at their destination. The tension outside mirrored the tension inside. Fans and onlookers speculated endlessly. What did he do? Why was he detained? Is this real? The world was watching, but the truth remained confined to the minds and files of a few. The heavy steel doors closed with a definitive clang behind him, the sound echoing down the narrow corridor of the federal holding facility. The air smelled of antiseptic and metal, sterile and unyielding, a far cry from the luxurious aircraft cabin, or even the muted warmth of airport terminals. Every footstep reverberated through the concrete halls, a reminder that in this space, every movement was observed, recorded, and cataloged. Keanu Reeves sat on the edge of a metal bench inside a small, dimly lit cell. The walls were bare, cold, and imposing, the fluorescent lights overhead casting harsh shadows across his face. The cuffs that had restrained him on the flight were gone, replaced by a palpable sense of confinement that required no metal to enforce. Here, freedom was measured not by chains, but by walls, rules, and invisible oversight. He had been through countless roles, portraying characters who had faced danger, injustice, and betrayal, yet nothing had prepared him for the surreal reality of being the subject rather than the observer. The irony was not lost on him. A man accustomed to wielding influence through performance, presence, and charisma now reduced to silence behind unfeeling walls. Minutes stretched into hours. A guard passed outside the cell, clipboard in hand, but offered no words. Surveillance cameras captured every detail, framing Keanu in angles that would never appear on screen. Never find an audience, never be edited for dramatic effect. The world had watched him descend from celebrity to detainee, but here, the world could not reach him, except through whispers in the media, speculation, and the fevered imaginations of millions. Yet Keanu remained composed. He did not pace. He did not rail against the injustice. Instead, he allowed himself to think, to calculate, reflect, and prepare. Each second in confinement was a lesson in patience, in strategy, in endurance. He had survived this long because he understood the power of calm in chaos, and now more than ever that principle would guide him. Outside, the news cycle exploded. Social media platforms lit up with theories, rumors, and conspiracy threads. Headlines declared everything and nothing, demanding answers that the authorities were unwilling to provide. Public opinion swung wildly, some defending him, others condemning him before details emerged. The world watched, debated, and speculated, but none of it altered the walls that enclosed him. A knock at the cell door pulled him from his thoughts. An official entered quietly, carrying documents that had traversed continents, encrypted and sanctioned at the highest levels. They placed the folder on a small table, the weight of international bureaucracy resting in a single stack of paper. Keanu opened it slowly, scanning its contents, formal charges, extradition records, and a maze of legalities. Designed to strip him of agency while preserving procedural correctness, he closed the folder. The truth was stark and unyielding.